Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the press conference of We Are Dominica Incorporated. Uh, we wanted to apprise the international community of how the relief effort is going. We're all very familiar with the developments on Dominica, and today we are fortunate to have in New York at this time the leader of the parliamentary opposition in Dominica, who will give a presentation. We Are Dominica Incorporated is a New York State nonprofit corporation which has attained tax exempt status. It's a 501c3 organization designated by the Internal Revenue Service, the tax authority of the United States. And it has launched, as just 2 weeks after the hurricane, it launched its relief and reconstruction program. The focus of WAD, We Are Dominica WAD, is on immediate relief, focused on anything that we get donated will be sent to Dominica. We have already sent our first shipment of 1,000 pounds of medical supplies airlifted into Canefield Airport 2 weeks ago. We still have more medical supplies in Houston ready to go to Dominica. But our medium-term focus is going to be on housing rehabilitation, assisting farmers to ramp up food production, and providing support to schools, hospitals, and clinics. How do we work? We partner with the Dominica Association of NGOs, with a primary partner, Dominica Save the Children Fund, which serves as the secretariat for the National Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, NANGO. Second, we are building partnerships with the Dominica diaspora communities in the United States. And we are building partnerships with charitable organizations, foundations, corporations, and municipalities. I want to say that our immediate short-term goal, in addition to shipping material supplies to Dominica, is to raise funds. And our projection is to raise, by early December, $100,000. We're asking, to do that, we're asking 1,000 people to give us $100. We know that it's just the beginning, because once we get into 2018, we have to ramp up our efforts to continue to raise money for Dominica. We are engaging the non-governmental sector in the United States, the civil society sector in the United States, and also governments in the United States at the state level and city level. We intend to send to Dominica in the next few weeks containers with farm tools, seeds, construction tools, solar products to help people have light in the communities, and to also be able to charge their cell phone in communities where there's no electricity. We are also working with different Dominica diaspora communities to set up designated funds. For example, we've just set up an account for Point Michel. The people from Point Michel in New York have set up a fund, and they are working to send their contribution to Point Michel. Similarly, we are looking at a designated contribution to the Kalinago territory, as some donors have expressed interest in helping that particular community, indigenous people of Dominica. And we are also looking at a fund for the Grand Bay District. In addition, we have started talks with Dominicans from Marigot who are interested in helping their community. So in a sense that because we have that status, we are able to provide that umbrella for communities and people from communities here in the US who want to help their specific communities. As we go forward, we would like you in Dominica to recommend to your families in the US to consider giving money to We Are Dominica. We are we have a simple message for Dominicans and non-Dominicans alike, and that is, if they contribute $100 to We Are Dominica, it will go a long way because we are pooling resources. So that's the minimum amount we are asking, and if people can't contribute $100, we will take whatever they can contribute. But we want Dominicans in the U.S. to make that bold contribution and be ready to assist. We know that Dominica is going to require long-term help. And we're here working with other partners in the U.S. to help Dominica. At this stage, I would like to introduce the leader of the parliamentary opposition in Dominica, the leader of the United Workers' Party, Mr. Lennox Linton, who is fortunate to have him in New York so he can give a perspective on the hurricane relief in Dominica. Mr. Linton.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, good morning. On September 18th, 2017, the Commonwealth of Dominica, a 300 square mile island of 70,000 people in the Caribbean Sea, was devastated beyond recognition by the angry Category 5 winds and raging floodwaters of Hurricane Maria. More than 30 citizens perished. Some estimates say over 5,000 houses were destroyed. Over 15,000 houses lost their roofs. The public infrastructure took a severe beating with widespread damage to roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, health centers, and other public buildings. Private sector operations in commerce, manufacturing, banking, and other services were battered by a combination of hurricane and criminal forces. Farms were laid to waste. The capital city of Roseau became the dumping ground for tons of wood, sand, and stone blasted from their places of rest in the nature island by unprecedented killer winds and floodwaters. Electricity, water, and communication services disappeared island-wide. Every single area of the country felt the pain of the devastation to the ground zero war zone that defined the reality of Dominica, even as the sun forgot to rise on the morning of September 19th, 2017. The second Category 5 storm to visit the island chain within 2 weeks confirmed that as a result of the largely ignored disharmony in the interplay between Mother Nature and human nature, climate has changed and continues to change. Irma was no hoax, neither was Maria. And there is nothing false about the brink of near total destruction on which Dominica was perched post-Maria. There have been no shortage of reminders in the past 6 weeks that the climb to climate-resilient Dominica will be steep, long, and painful. We have lives to mend, people to shelter, bodies to feed, a broken society to heal, fields to replant, an economy to fix, roadways, bridges to rebuild, health, education, and utility services to restore, and so much more. Today, we thank our brothers and sisters at home and abroad, the international aid agencies and disaster relief organizations, the development cooperation partners, and the entire global family of countries, people, and governments represented by the United Nations who have rallied with empathy, purpose, and commitment to assist us in this time of severe humanitarian crisis. The past 6 weeks have seen courageous, dedicated efforts above and beyond the call of duty from patriots at home and abroad, as well as individuals and organizations from neighboring and distant lands to secure a new, improved Dominica. We thank them all. Much has been accomplished, but much more remains to be done, and it would have been further along the recovery road if, instead of paying lip service to the truth that it cannot do it alone, government had, in the spirit of good democratic governance, allowed all ideas to contend and all hands to be on deck. Parliamentarians representing over 40% of the electorate in a parliamentary democracy, have been completely shut out of the state's relief, recovery, and reconstruction program, which is being funded by the voluntary contributions and tax dollars from Dominica and the rest of the world. Parliament, the country's highest decision-making body, has been completely sidelined to facilitate the partisan political antics of a one-man show by an I-man who tells world leaders at the United Nations he cannot do it alone, but insists in Dominica it is all about him and him alone. As a result of the failure to provide sound democratic governance leadership for Dominica's post-disaster management responsibility to date, number one, food aid is not being distributed fairly, equitably, transparently to all citizens based on need and according to their levels of need. Ministers of government have been excused from their portfolios, some of them dealing with critical areas like health, housing, and livelihood restoration, so they can take charge of the partisan sharing of relief supplies. Even ambassadors posted in important capitals who could serve as envoys securing assistance around the world have been recalled to be involved in sharing relief. Thousands of tons of relief supplies are backed up at the main port of entry while needy citizens struggle to find food. A barge with supplies from the people of Trinidad and Tobago stayed at the Dominica port for 10 days before the cargo could enter the country. Leadership and management performance continues to fall well short of the daily reports and promises painting a rosy picture. Thousands are losing hope and are leaving, and there appears to be no leadership concern about population stabilization. As leader of the parliamentary opposition of Dominica, and in recognition of the critical role parliamentarians must play in bridging the gap between citizens' expectations and the conduct of governance, I call today for an urgent intervention by the Secretary General of the United Nations to ensure that post-disaster relief, recovery, and reconstruction in Dominica, heavily supported financially and otherwise by the United Nations, follow the principles and disciplines of democratic governance. By United Nations General Assembly Resolution 55-2 of September 8, 2000, heads of state and government resolved to, quote, strengthen cooperation between the United Nations and national parliaments through their world organization and the Interparliamentary Union, including in areas of peace, security, economic and social development, sustainable development and disaster risk reduction, international law, human rights, democracy, and good governance, gender equality, and youth engagement. If there was ever a time when a member country of the United Nations needed the principles of democratic governance to guide sustainable development and disaster risk reduction, that time is now, and the country is the Commonwealth of Dominica. While we applaud the Secretary General's flash appeal to raise $31 million for the people of Dominica by December of this year, United Nations initiatives of this kind require that we mainstream the oversight function into the work of the Dominica Parliament so that government can be held accountable for vital global resources committed to building a better Dominica. We note with regret that the visit of Secretary General Antonio Guterres to Dominica on October 8, 2017, appears to have endorsed government sidelining of Parliament instead of encouraging an overarching parliamentary dimension to national reconstruction. As leader of the parliamentary opposition, and on behalf of all Dominicans who firmly believe in peace, in security, in freedom, and the rule of law, I wish to assure the world community that has rallied to assist us of our commitment to a happy, a secure, peaceful world for all, and to honest, efficient, effective utilization of all resources placed at our disposal for the reconstruction of our beautiful country at the highest possible levels of climate resiliency. We believe that the world community, standing to be counted in support of rebuilding Dominica, has a right to expect accountability and transparency in the utilization of the resources that are committed to Dominica. And in testimony to the sincerity of our engagement, I wish today to apologize to the leadership and people of the family of nations for the disgraceful conduct of the government of Dominica over the years in selling and or gifting diplomatic immunity to rogues and scoundrels, some of whom have grievously injured the reputation and integrity of the United Nations. These flagrant violations of the 1961 United Nations Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations have facilitated crimes against humanity like sanctions busting and have endangered global security. And because they can be easily avoided by honest human behavior, they represent a far more unnecessary threat to life on Earth than any unavoidable Category 5 hurricane. Today, we ask the world community to continue to stand with us and to continue to walk with us as we seek to move purposefully for the reconstruction of our blessed country. This is not easy. Nothing about this is easy, as I'm sure the world understands, which is why it has been so generous with its time and resources in helping us at this time. I thank you very much. I'll take your questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open to questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Rebecca Theodore. I'm an international journalist. Thank you so much, Honorable Lennox Linton, for making this beautiful speech here for us, the members of the media, this morning. It was a very beautiful speech, and I love your articulation very much. You did notice, I noticed that you said that Hurricane Maria did not only cross through ideological and partition lines in Dominica. From what I have seen, from what I have heard, the conduct of governance in Dominica has worsened, especially when it comes to democratic governance. If there is to be economic reconstruction, then the voices of both sides must be heard. There must be the opposition, because the task of the opposition, the job of the opposition is to oppose. How can we know what is existing within the framework of democracy in Dominica if we don't have the voice of the opposition? And for now, we don't have that. Beside this press conference, Honorable Lennox Linton, what other plans does the opposition have in place to let their voices be heard to the international community?
Thank you very much. We have been largely silent in the last 6 weeks because, like all patriotic Dominicans who mean well for the country, we thought that the government needed to have some space to find its feet and to do what it believes is in the best interest of the country at this time of crisis. But we have watched with dismay, in the service of the country, we have been ignored. So what we have done is to focus on our constituencies. Like, for example, in my area, the constituency of Marigot, one of the first things we did there, after I made the long trek across Dominica through the denuded forest of Dominica, walking through fallen trees and landslides for over 30 miles to get to Marigot, because that's the only way we could have gotten there at the time. And we formed, with the village council, an organization for relief, recovery, and reconstruction for the community, which is fully engaged, meets on a regular basis, and has taken on the responsibility for fair and equitable distribution of relief in the constituency, even though, parallel to that, the Dominica Labour Party has its own organization that is doing its own people, another one-man show, doing some things there as well, to rival what the village council and the new organization is accomplishing very well. Beyond relief, we're looking to recovery and reconstruction, and to assembling resources that can help people build back better, so the community will be in a much better position next year at this time, when these kinds of hurricanes, the new brand that we are seeing now more and more these days, the Category 5s and maybe higher, visit us. But as a political party, we have also been looking at areas of the world that can provide assistance to Dominica longer term, because this is not just about what happened on the 18th and the 6 weeks that were gone by. This is going to be a long journey. We will need multi-year commitments from international institutions and friendly governments around the world to help us to bring back the economy, to help us to mend a broken society, to help us to build livelihoods and capability. So in the past week, we have visited Algeria, and we have visited we used the opportunity of having to make a prior visit to the Saharan Democratic Republic. And we were supposed to have done that some months ago. It didn't work out. We were scheduled to do it in October. And when the hurricane came, well, there were thoughts that, well, let's do it now more than ever. And so we took the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to visit Algiers and to visit the Saharan Arab Democratic Republic, the SADR, and the Polisario Front, that is the government in exile for that group of people fighting for their self-determination and independence from Morocco that occupied the territory illegally back in the 1970s. So now we've had some very good discussions with the foreign ministry officials in Algiers about assistance to Dominica and the Caribbean region generally. And we used the opportunity of being there to engage with ambassadors representing South Africa and Nigeria as three of the leading countries in the African Union, about an African Union initiative to help build climate resiliency, etc. in Dominica over time. We're looking at a new relationship with our brothers and sisters in Africa that could impact an area that is important to all the countries of the Caribbean, namely disaster vulnerability, and how some resources from that part of the world can help us. But we've also had discussions about the agriculture that has been badly battered in Dominica and the kind of technical assistance we could receive from the resource of Nigeria, for example, to help us in this post-disaster reconstruction. So we believe that in going to that part of the world, we're opening up new possibilities for helping Dominica above and beyond what we are normally focused on. And this we thought was an important initiative. We're going to continue in the coming weeks and months to build on that initiative and to engage more directly with specific players on areas of assistance that can do a lot for Dominica. So we are hoping that the government understands, as it says to the UN, we cannot do this alone, but we need you to help us. So it is saying to the world community, we need your help, but it is saying to us in Dominica, available to help, we're not interested. And there's a serious there's a serious something there that we need to consider, because it cannot be that you are leaving your country, you're leaving capability on the table in your country at the level of your parliament, and you're going to the outside world and telling the outside world, well, we cannot do it alone. Who are you? Who are you talking about when you say we cannot do it alone? You are excluding parliamentary representation for over 40% of the people of Dominica from the state relief and recovery program, but you're telling the world we cannot do it alone. No, you cannot do it alone. So first of all, show the world that you're serious and get all hands on deck in Dominica. And we believe that there's a role for the United Nations to play in bringing the government to book, especially as it regards democratic governance, parliamentary oversight for government finances, etc., in this period. Because what we do not want as Dominicans, as the peace-loving, law-abiding citizens of Dominica, those who believe in accountability and transparency, what we do not want is a situation where hard-earned resources from around the world are being assembled to assist us, and then we are not able to tell the world, honestly, transparently, what has happened to those funds in the best interest of Dominica. The question, yes.
Herman Hall, editor of Everybody's Caribbean magazine in New York.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So I have, as I said,
so that's one question.
at a time.
Right.
Okay. Did you have a meeting with the Prime Minister?
Okay.
Given it's a state of emergency,
Okay.
and it's a national crisis.
Okay. So you'd like an answer to that question now? No, I have not had a meeting with the Prime Minister, and I called the Prime Minister for the first time at 8 minutes after 12 the night of the storm. I did not get a response. And let me just explain. I'm using the number that the Prime Minister gave us, opposition members of Parliament, to reach him should we desire so to do. I could understand at the time the Prime Minister was probably caught up with things about the storm. I called him later in the day. I called him subsequently during the week, and on a few occasions thereafter. There was never any response. There was never any return of the phone call. And so I took that to mean that the Prime Minister did not wish to hear from me, because he knows my number. He did not wish to hear from me. He did not wish to engage with me. We had, interestingly, after Parliament was ignored for the rest of September of 2017, we got notification of an emergency meeting of the Parliament on the afternoon of the 6th of October for the 7th of October. We looked at it and we said, well, let's make a special effort to be there. The government wants to meet in emergency session. Except that the only thing the government wanted to do with that session of Parliament was to get the authority to extend the state of emergency until the end of December this year. At that meeting of the Parliament, emergency meeting, all the members on our side stood up, spoke, addressed certain concerns about relief. The government ministers largely remained quiet and said nothing. The mover of the motion was the Attorney General. He presented and he closed. And then we had a long soliloquy from the Prime Minister for over an hour, saying basically the same things that had been said in the daily briefings. What was interesting, though, was that while we were in session in the Parliament and the Attorney General was trying to close the debate on the motion, one of the members on the government side expressed great frustration that this was going on for too long and suggested it is time for him to finish with that because we have our ration to go and share. And so that's one. I went a little bit, digressed a little bit, but I thought it was important to give you a picture of where we are in Dominica, because we as the parliamentary opposition are not officially engaged with the government players in the relief, recovery, and reconstruction. In fact, if you look at relief alone, where food aid is being distributed, They have given the members of parliament on the government side authority to distribute relief in their areas, in their constituencies. In the constituencies that we represent, we have no such authority, and they have given that authority instead to the people they would like to win the elections next time around from their party, but who are not elected. We are the elected ones in those constituencies. We don't have the authority over the distribution of relief supplies. We don't think that should belong to parliamentarians in any event. But since they have it, the thing to do would be to pass it to us as well. It hasn't happened. And so we are effectively on the outside looking in, but thinking of ways that we can help Dominica, because this is going to be a long slog.
Right, but when the outside world hear of your grievances, and obviously they may be legitimate, do you believe it will be a disadvantage? Do you think countries may think twice and say, well, why are we helping a country when there are internal bickering and the leadership, whether it's the government or the opposition, cannot have a single dialogue?
Okay, well, we're not bickering, number one, and we believe that 6 weeks after this storm, it is time to come clean with the world community that has been clean with us. I do not believe it serves any purpose for the world community to believe all is well with the resources that they're placing at our disposal when all is not well. That has to be a responsibility placed on the government and the people of Dominica to get their act together, to fix things up. We in the parliamentary opposition alone cannot fix things. But the things need to be fixed so that things could go right in the Dominica and the global family. And therefore we believe it is time to start talking about these issues, and it's time to start asking agencies like the United Nations to pay attention to what is going on. Because we cannot have this august body that talks about parliamentary democracy, that talks about good governance, that talks about the role of the Interparliamentary Union, of a strategic partner to the UN. Wonderful principles to be guided by. And then we here now, as a member country in crisis, battered by a disaster, we're ignoring at the level of government, flagrantly ignoring the principles and practices of good governance. And we must keep quiet about it in the opposition, because it may give the wrong impression to the rest of the world that wants to give us relief. Well, we say, no, let the world community give us relief, not under false pretenses, but under the proper understanding of what is going on. And let institutions that represent the world community like the UN step in to ensure that the government of Dominica does the right thing for the people of Dominica, and by extension, the people of the world community.
Well, let us say you're successful.
Take your mic.
Let us say you are successful on your trips within the international community. And as I said, you are successful. How would you distribute it, whatever aid, since government obviously has the final say? And would you be following the path of government in the sense that your 40%, I'm assuming is the electorate, the opposition, would they only be the recipient? Do you have a mechanism in place?
You understand why we need to fix this? Because when we go out there, we are not asking people that we are fortunate to meet, like representatives of countries and so on, to send money to us. We're asking, for example, for these governments to support the flash appeal of the United Nations, which they're trying to raise $31 million by the end of this year. So that's what we're doing. This is not, wherever we are fortunate to go and talk to people who are capable of assisting Dominica, it is never a call or a campaign to get money for us to spend. Understand that clearly. That is why we want, when it goes into the government, it is done, when it goes into the state, where the government has the responsibility, it is done in a transparent and accountable manner. It has not been happening so far. We fear that that same pattern is going to continue into recovery and reconstruction from what we have seen in the relief phase, and so we want it stopped now, so that all of us can advocate for resources to come into the country to be fairly distributed and effectively utilized for the good of the country.
Right. Have you discuss your grievances. When I say your grievances, I mean from the opposition perspective with CARICOM heads of government?
No, we have not.
Why, may I ask?
Well, no, well, the opportunity hasn't presented itself yet. We trust that there will be opportunities to do that. But we were taking, as I said to you, we were taking advantage of some prior engagements that we had to open up the African Union area as a potential area of support and contributions for disaster recovery efforts. But we will be talking with CARICOM players. CARICOM is planning a donor conference in New York next month. Again, we'll see how that conference is structured and whether or not we have any role to play, because it could well be that CARICOM believes that it should be all about the government as opposed to the parliament of the country. So let's see how that works.
Just a final question.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the local audience. We at Everybody's Caribbean Magazine. We at Everybody's Caribbean Magazine, we receive frequent calls with non-Dominicans or some non-Dominicans who are friends and family and so forth, and they want to send a barrel or they want to send something to Dominica, but they do not know what is the latest on that. Let us say I send something to Dominica, would it get to my intended family or my intended friend, for example?
Okay, let's explain it this way. Initially, the government had taken the position that no personal items would be accepted. Shortly thereafter, probably within the first 2 weeks of this phase, that was overturned. So it's been some time now since people are able to send personal relief items to their family members in Dominica. The problem is with the operations of the main port, where hundreds of containers with relief supplies and barrels for individual family members in Dominica are backed up at the port, and they're not moving. So people who weeks ago sent food to family members who should now be using that food to feed their hungry bellies cannot get it. That is where the problem is, and that's an area where we see the failure of the government to assign logistics, competencies, and skills to the leadership of what is in fact a logistics function, the movement in, distribution of food supplies.
You can find us on the web at www.wearedominica.com, as well as www.wearedominica.org. We look forward to partnering and working and supporting our homeland. Thank you.